Hello and welcome to episode 216 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' off-topic podcast podcast of many topics, airing every week. My name is Mike Sollosi, and I'm joined by two relatively recent RPG fan podcasters, starting with Joe Padilla.
Hey there.
And also joining us, Jonathan Logan.
Hello.
Now, for the month of December, our official 2-episode game is Ghost Trick, the 2010 DS game that I look upon very, very fondly. I'm just going to jump right into my personal history with this game. I love Ghost Trick. I talked about it a little bit on our DS dedicated episode in September, and right after playing this, I immediately lent it to one of my friends just so I could have someone to talk to about this game, and she finished it maybe even faster than I did, and this is a very cool, very special DS game to me, and I'm really excited to play it. This is my first time playing it in 9 years. I played it just the one time around when it came out 9 years ago, and so far I'm almost as excited to talk about it as I was in 2010. So Jonathan, I know you've also played Ghost Trick before this podcast run. How did you find it the first time you played it?
Honestly, I can't remember when I first heard of the game. I mean, I got into it because I was such a huge fan of Ace Attorney.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I suspect I probably saw it on IGN or something like that, and it just looked like a perfect game for me. Bought it immediately on the DS, adored it, played it all the way through, and then when it came out on iOS, I think it was a year or two later, I bought it then as well, just because I really wanted to support it, and I thought it was even better on an iPad.
That makes sense to me because Ghost Trick, even though it's on the Nintendo dual screen, it really is a one-screen game, and almost everything is done with just a couple action buttons on the lower corners of the screen. It's as good or better on iOS or on iPad.
Oh yeah, it's like it's made for a touchscreen, mm-hmm. because it sort of is. And also the graphics just look absolutely ridiculously great on a bigger screen. So yeah, I played through it again then, and then I hadn't played it for a few years, and then I played it again all the way through for this podcast. And had a fantastic time doing so.
All right. Now, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, this is your first time playing Ghost Trick. First, is that true? And second, what are your earliest impressions?
Yes, it's my first time playing through this. I got it because my friend, I was talking about video games with my friend Becky, and she had said, oh, have you ever played Ghost Trick? It's one of my favorite games. And I said, I have never heard of that. And then she said, okay, then you definitely have to borrow it for me. So she gave me this game, and I have been playing it, and it's fantastic. I really like this game, and I haven't had any previous experience with kind of Shu Takumi's games previous in terms of Ace Attorney or anything. I just know of them. But I really like this sense of humor and everything it has.
Right. Well, Shu Takumi is an interesting cat. I don't think he's developed a whole lot as executive producer other than Ace Attorney. He has been with Capcom for something like 30 years or almost 30 years. He worked on a few of the Resident Evil and Dino Crisis games. But really, he was the first game where he was sort of the writer, director, producer was the first Ace Attorney for Game Boy Advance in 2001. And since then, he has been basically all Ace Attorney, except with this one Ghost Trick diversion in 2010. But he's a really interesting dude. You can feel his sense of humor and his sort of quirky writing and his interesting ideas about gameplay mechanics in all of his games. And all of the Ace Attorney games don't necessarily play the same. They all have different sort of mini games and wrinkles as the series has gone on and have gotten more complex as they've gone on. But Ghost Trick is not really like those. And one last thing about Shu Takumi before we move on is Shu Takumi for many years owned a Pomeranian named Missile. And his Missile snuck into things like character art or poster art for several of the previous Ace Attorney games. Maybe not all of them, but I know that you can find Missile in sort of either background art or poster art for several of the Ace Attorney games, and he decided to make Missile a much more impactful main character for Ghost Trick, and Missile shows up in Chapter 2, I think. But this game is not about Missile. This game is about Sissel, who is the game's main character. We see Sissel as this a man with sort of very pointy hair that almost looks like a ghostly wisp in its shape, but with a snazzy red suit and black sunglasses. I one last thing before we dive into the game proper, Jonathan, we really need to be careful not to spoil the second half of Ghost Trick. Stay inside the first 9 chapters. The game is 18 chapters total, because there are some surprises that I would love to withhold from Joe. Do you follow?
Oh, I absolutely follow.
Gotcha. And now I'm going to first jump around a little bit and talk about maybe my 2 favorite things about Ghost Trick, because those 2 favorite things show up in the first 1 minute of the game. First of all, the very premise. You're a ghost, you wake up, you see your corpse below you, and you decide to solve your own murder. Great. I'm immediately in. That's just the best. That could be the start of a novel, start of a movie, start of a game, and I'm instantly intrigued. Like, I gotta see at least beyond the first scene of this thing. And the second thing I love about Ghost Trick is that the 2 actions, or really the 2 buttons you interact with in the game, are ghost and trick. And you are just ghosting and tricking through the whole game. And there's an elegance in that gameplay design that I appreciate greatly. But before the ghosting and tricking, first we have our characters. Sissel wakes up as a ghost. He sees his corpse beneath him, and he sees a man with bluish skin and a shotgun pursuing a young woman in a junkyard. And sort of on the advice or prompting of another ghost named Ray, Sissel sort of chases after the pursuer and the pursuant, and uses some elementary poltergeist powers to save the life of the young woman. And then Sissel and Ray have a conversation. Ray is inhabiting a very, very expressive Dancy Lamp, who's a little bit like a red version of the Pixar logo, I think. And Ray basically tells Sissel how ghost powers work, and say, hey, you should go and try save people. And that's what Sissel's doing, basically just following clues and following people, saving their lives using some time travel and poltergeist powers to rewind time and prevent folks' deaths, in hopes of finding the truth of who killed him, why he was killed, and also who he was. Because Sissel is a ghost with just some images and some powers and no memories to help him along this journey. So, okay, that was a bit of a soliloquy for me. I apologize. Jono, what were your early impressions of the first couple chapters? Like, what came back to you? What struck out as unusual or good or bad about this game?
Well, I think it might be one of the best tutorial levels I've ever played, just because of how beautifully integrated it is into the plot. It doesn't feel artificial. It doesn't feel like the game is telling you, okay, here's how you do this thing. You're thrown immediately into the action. There are stakes. She's going to get shot unless you figure out how to do this. I mean, it's a simple trick, switch over to the, what are they called again? Barricade? Yeah, the arm, and push it up. But I mean, it's still just, oh, okay, this is how this works. And you feel like you've accomplished something right off the bat. And then if that's brilliantly taken away from you when she gets shot and you can't do anything about it because it's out of your range, and then you get thrown right into the plot. And it's the kind of game where it doesn't give you a whole lot of time to catch your breath. It's really a sprint all the way through.
Yeah, each scene, and there's typically 1 or maybe 1.5 scenes in each chapter, is someone's death has occurred. That person holds some key or some clue to what Sissel's trying to find out, and you have to rescue that person. So basically every moment of the game feels high stakes, and with a sense of urgency right from the get-go. And I mean, you were absolutely right, and that's a good tutorial, because there's no very clear-cut, press left to go left, press right to go right nature of this gameplay. Like jumping into this game, you probably don't know what ghosting and tricking are.
No, you're in Sissel's shoes exactly.
So
He doesn't know what's going on, and neither do you.
you don't know what's going on. You don't know how your powers work. You don't know what to do. And then Ray helpfully guides you, but doesn't even spend that long doing it. This isn't a game that handholds you for a large portion of it. It's the most handholding that happens, I think, is if you fail a mission a couple times. They'll say something like, I think the solution must have to do something with that lamp, or I think I need to go back earlier in the timeline, something like that. It never feels forced, and the tutorial never feels intrusive, and that's I think people want different levels of tutorial out of their games. Sometimes people want more explanation. Sometimes people want less handholding. There's examples, the whole spectrum of Dark Souls to Skyward Sword of how much tutorial should a game have, and I think that Ghost Trick strikes a really good balance. Joe, in the early chapters, how did you adapt to the mechanics? Because this is again your first time playing. How long did it take to feel natural, and what are your early impressions of how the gameplay happens in Ghost Trick?
Well, it's funny that you bring up Dark Souls because I was playing Bloodborne in between this, which has been a very interesting contrast between Ghost Trick and Bloodborne. But I honestly I took to the mechanics pretty easily. I was like, okay, I understand what the rules are, and it seems pretty well laid out. There's one point that we'll talk about later on where I did not feel like that, but for the most part, I feel like I kind of took to it like a fish to water. Just kind of, it made sense even despite its absurdity in terms of its actual gameplay. That was pretty sensical and logical to me. But it definitely was a weird way to start out with it.
I think I completely agree. I also think that it's kind of easy for us to forget about it now because it's an older system now. But I think it might be one of the best showcases for the touchscreen on the DS available
totally.
on the system. It's so intuitive and so smooth and easy to navigate your way around. That and it feels like that on iOS as well. But I think it's a really great showcase for the DS hardware.
And remarkably, I don't think you need to use the touchscreen at all in the game. Every menu button it does correspond to a face button. I think it's you can save with the L or R buttons, which I've done a couple times. But the touchscreen feels so natural and so intuitive for this. And like when you press the ghost button is how you travel between objects, and objects are represented by nodes on the screen, and you can just sort of float between them with a limited range, and then switching back to the to normal time, reinstates the background art, and time starts to flow normally, and you can press the trick button to manipulate whatever object you're resting in. So basically you have some time travel powers and some poltergeist powers, and also you can rewind the time back to 4 minutes before a person's death, as long as the corpse is less than 1 day old. You can only save person within a day of their death time, which is also explains away the ability to retry missions, and also sort of sets boundaries for what mechanics are available in the game, and limits for Sissel's powers. So yeah, that's the game. And after you save the young woman in the junkyard, her name's Lynn, and she's a rookie police detective. If anything, I think the stakes feel higher because instead of saving an adult woman, in the second chapter, you're saving a little girl and a dog. And I'm more inclined to I don't know, my stupid human brain is sort of suffering more and rooting harder for a little girl and a dog. It's at Lynn's apartment. There's a dog named Missile, just like Shu Takumi's Missile, and a girl named Camila that lives there, and a new hitman who has a sniper rifle, not a shotgun, storms in, shoots the dog, and ties up the girl. So Sissel meets up with the dog's ghost, goes 4 minutes before the dog's death, and then basically manipulates the scene so that Missile leads Camila to a hiding spot under a couch, so that when the gunman arrives, there's no one there. He pauses and leaves, and that's one of the tensest moments of a first hour of a game I ever remember. Just silence, no background music, a guy with a gun, a girl and a dog hiding under a couch, just sort of walks around, sits down on the very couch. I think maybe makes a phone call and then leaves. Like that did. Am I mistaken, or was that a really tense moment for level 2 of a video game?
No, I agree. And also the moment where you see the death happen,
Yeah.
it's genuinely tragic. It hits you hard because Missile is so excited. It's like, ooh, new friend, and runs up to him, and then he shoots the dog, which is something you rarely see in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And we also can't forget about who exactly these hitmen are because they are hilarious.
Oh yeah, it's
I
nearsighted Jigo and who's it? Steps ahead
one
something.
one step ahead Tango.
Yeah, one step ahead Tango.
I I almost fell out of my seat during the scene in the junkyard with nearsighted Jigo when he's like, there are two things that are looking pretty dim: my eyesight and your future.
This game has the gift of
That
gab.
was so good.
And Missile's very excited personality when he talks to Sissel, who has a respectful tone. Like he even calls Missile Little Warrior a couple times, which makes me think, oh, this game was definitely written by dog owners. But like Missile's happy-go-lucky dog personality and Sissel's much more relaxed personality with some pretty good dialogue in Chapter 2. Because when someone dies and Sissel attempts to save them, the conscious ghost becomes aware of Sissel and can talk to them. This because he saves Lynn in Chapter 1, and I think at least 3 other chapters. Lynn has a bit of a death problem in this game,
which is a great running joke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But by death 3 or 4, like Sissel's asking her, "Are you getting tired of this? Have you tried to not die this evening?"
And she's just there like, where were you?
Yeah. A couple deaths in, she starts getting a little bit chippy about it.
Yeah, there's the one where she just says, "Ha ha, I died."
Yeah. This game is self-aware and is playing with its mechanics and its dialogue intertwining. It's just a really good overall package. But we've talked about the mechanics a little bit, but I don't think we've really painted a picture of how a level goes in this game. The level in the apartment, basically, Camila starts out with headphones on, so she can't hear anything, and what you have to do is use poltergeist powers and just bump things around so that Lynn accidentally drops her earphones in a fish tank, making them useless, so she can hear Missile, and then manipulating Missile around so that by I think by having Camila drop a donut where a mouse can get it, Missile chases after the mouse. Camila chases after Missile, and then notices that there's a decoration fallen from the Christmas tree. So they both go under the couch to get the ball or whatever item they're chasing after. At which point the hitman enters. So that is convoluted as hell and requires weird timing and weird scene prediction by the player. But basically every level is a Rube Goldberg machine with some pieces missing, and you use your limited poltergeist and item movement powers to fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle. And again, there's a running clock with events happening in certain orders, and you having to sometimes perform actions corresponding to specific events. And sometimes the timing can be a little bit tight, like I'm trying to think of one that fit. Like you need there's in some of the prison levels there's droplets of water falling from the ceiling pretty quickly, and you have to travel between droplets of water sometimes because they're the only sort of bridge to get across the room, and so that will involve waiting for a droplet, pressing ghosts at just the right time so the droplet's halfway down and floating across. This is not a turn-based game. There is an hourglass with stakes that feel very real, but it's definitely a puzzle game and definitely a sort of visual novel game. It's you can't really describe it in terms of other games necessarily. Either Jono or Joe, was there a specific mechanic in one stage that jumped out at you like, I can't believe what I just did? This is going to be weird to explain to my friends.
I think my favorite is one of my favorites is chapter 7, I think, the chicken kitchen, where you have to continuously manipulate things to make your way around the rest. I think one of the smartest things they did is the restrictions that they put on Sissel's powers and movement. Like, you cannot travel very far away from, as they're called, cores.
No,
So
I think it's maybe
if
a
you,
half inch on a regular DS screen.
Yeah, so if you want to be able to get around, you need to learn how to manipulate items and latch onto them to get to other places in the, I guess, the level, which is, I mean, that's the challenge, really. If you could go anywhere, it would be much easier. But there's few things more frustrating than like seeing something happening just out of your reach, and you're like, oh, if I could only get over there, I could do this and save the day. And you need to figure out how to get over there.
And sometimes it's waiting for someone to raise their arm a certain distance, or waiting for a water droplet to fall, like I described a second ago. It's not always easy to figure out. In Chapter 10, which was only 1 or 2 missions ago for me, I think I'm in Chapter 11 or 12 right now, it was one chapter I struggled a little bit with, because you only have about a half second for when a certain character raises a pitcher of water high up in the air, and then quickly puts it down. And to get to the higher part of the level, you have to be there for the exact half second that the pitcher of water is high and not on the table or on the desk. There's a lot of situations like that require precise timing. But I don't think the game's ever playing unfair. They give you occasional clues in dialogue or in game over screens. And, it does follow a specifically weird video game logic, and usually there's only one solution or two solutions. Some puzzles have not much leeway at all, but I never felt really betrayed by the puzzle mechanics. Joe, was there a specific puzzle mechanic or a specific action you performed as Sissel that you found particularly interesting or amusing?
I found the scene in the chicken kitchen when you had to switch around the chickens, because one of them had a wire on it, or like a ladybug, and I was like, oh, she keeps noticing it, and you had to turn off the fans so that the room would get smoky, so that the undercover agent would be like, shoot, I have to turn on the fans. It's way too smoky in here. And then when she has her back turned, you have to turn around the chickens, because there's a little pedal on the bottom of the floor that rotates the table.
Yeah, because the chef uses the pedal to rotate, to prepare a new chicken, then rotate it to the waitress, and then start work on the new chicken.
And that's another great example of his limited range, because the pedal is just out of your reach.
Yeah. The challenge in that level, once you figure out the solution, is how to get from the switch that closes the vents over to the opposite side of the room where the oven is, and then to the bottom of the room where the pedal is, all within the time window of when the waitress has her back turned. And the whole level is freaking convoluted, because the death is Lynn again, unsurprising, because a giant chicken, would you call that hanging decoration?
I would call it the most dignified death in gaming.
Okay, a giant decorative roast chicken falls on her when a van crashes into the side of the restaurant. And what you have to do is first find your way to a different part of the restaurant, sort of see where a couple different groups are seated, overhear some conversations, including a mysterious couple with blue skin, similar to the two hitmen at the beginning of the game, overhear some things, and then when you realize that you can't really prevent Lynn's death in a normal way, you decide to latch onto the corpse of the driver of the van that crashed into the building. And it turns out that's a detective who was trying to spy on the restaurant, because some kind of mysterious deal was supposed to go down involving the blue couple. And so you go to where the detective dies, and realizes that something in his earpiece caused him to faint in his van, and then lose control and crash into the restaurant. And then that's when you figure out, by going from his phone call to the undercover agent in the restaurant, that he died because the bug that was put on a chicken was discovered by the couple, and they smashed it, creating the sharp sound in his earbud that made him lose control of the car. Again, this is bonkers to explain to someone that has not experienced it for themselves, and you end up going between three different scenes, or four different scenes: the restaurant to the park where the van is, to the van to the kitchen in the restaurant, and then once you switch the chickens and an unbugged chicken reaches the couple, the scene plays out normally and the van never crashes into the restaurant. That's what that's the kind of logic we're working with here.
And it all makes sense within the context of the game.
Yeah. And also Sissel, I forgot to mention this earlier, Sissel has the unusual ability to travel rapidly along phone lines. So if you're inside a phone and someone has a conversation with another phone, you can zoom over fast travel style to that phone number, and that is a crucial gameplay element in this game. It's the means of traveling from scene to scene, and also lets you spy on phone conversations, which is important in at different times. There's a lot going on in Ghost Trick.
And the crucial parts of that level with the paddle is that the chef squirts some sort of special sauce out of his head onto the chicken, and so you have to travel through his hat when he does that, because the hat creates the bridge to the paddle. Like, what?
Yeah, you have to wait for him to lift his hat off, so it's sort of below his torso instead of on his head, and that creates the bridge that you need, going from what is it, like vent to oven to toke to pedal.
Yeah, something along those lines. It is kind of wild.
It is a more complicated kitchen scene than any part of Pixar's Ratatouille.
I think it might be my favorite level in the game, just because there are so many parts and so much travel, and you're in so many things. And again, I was just thinking about it. The way Lynn dies is amazing, because it's also beautifully animated. She selflessly and bravely pushes the undercover detective out of the way of the incoming van. She does this amazing backflip kind of thing out of the way of the van herself, and she's just having like a moment of triumph where she's standing there, and then she gets crushed by a giant chicken. It's a perfect example of the game's sense of humor.
And also, we're going to go into the animations in this game later, because we might have to do a whole third episode just about the character animations in this game.
So freaking good.
But there's no voice acting, but there are some exclamations and sound effects. And one of my favorites is a couple characters use this, but including the chef, while he's cooking, has a nice operatic dee da 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 that is one of the few human sound effects in this game. Again, it's all done for sort of cartoonish exaggeration and expression and comedy, and I love it. I love all of it.
Totally.
So should we get into the characters and animations next?
Yeah, sure.
They're real good.
Love the smooth animations in this game. The backgrounds are very static, and you can even see sort of the interactable objects in the game, like certain objects that Sissel can clearly jump into, or most of the character models sort of pop off the screen a little bit. But the animations are so smooth; they look amazing for a DS game. And let's see, Detective Cabanella, one of Lynn's superiors, does like Michael Jackson poses and like a descending stairs dance that is just mesmerizing. There's the junkyard superintendent, who is some kind of a amateur mechanic, has a pigeon on his head that is always doing pigeon things whenever the professor's walking around. Missile is a delightfully expressive little Pomeranian dog. The chef with his singing and his toque and all of that. But maybe the best character animations in this whole game, and perhaps for the entire DS, are the comedy duo Prison Guards.
Yes.
Now, I don't know how much you know about Japanese comedy, but one form of Japanese comedy that's sort of a classic is to do an Abbott and Costello or Laurel and Hardy comedy duo, where there's one sort of more stoic performer and one more animated weirdo performer, sort of a joke man and a straight man. And these two prison guards are, again, definitely doing Japanese comedy routines, but the the more expressive of the two, does these hilarious like excited reactions, these chair spins on his desk, and when he's feeling panicked, he does a truly mesmerizing dance in the middle of his office that is just the best. I love it. I want a whole game about those two prison guards.
It's so good. And when he spins around in his chair because he's upset that the other officer threw away his notes, and there's just this sound that's a bit like the Phoenix Wright objection sound, and he just does this dejected spin. He's like, "Why did you do that?"
And that's only part of it. He puts a note on the board, and you, being the asshole ghost that you are, goes to the note and blows it off the board. You with your little by pressing the trick button, and it lands on the other cop's desk. And so the cop's like, "Hey, what's this note about?" And then the jokey cop goes to a long, detailed story of what was on that note and the complicated case it was about and who that prisoner is. And then the other cop just sort of ignores him, throws away the note, and then the excited cop does this really exaggerated spin on his desk chair, and it's just awesome. And the different cases that he talks about on his notes are kind of real goofy. One of them was a musician who, in the middle of a concert, stops singing and starts spouting state secrets to the audience, which
That's me.
which got a lot which got a lot of people confused. And then this other one was someone who broke into the police commissioner's office, seemed confused while holding the commissioner at gunpoint, and then ordered 4 plates of curry over the phone, and that is me. So yeah, those are 2 minor characters that you meet in the prison later as well. Their names, I think, are Rockstar Jailbird and Curry Jailbird, which I also find very amusing. But Jono, there's so many expressive characters and goofy character animations. Is there a favorite character or specific visual element that you loved that we need to talk about before we close shop?
Well, it's like you said, Cabanela is amazing. But when we were talking about it, it just occurred to me that in a former life I was an actor, and because of the 2D backgrounds, it just occurred to me that this thing is set up very much like a stage play. Like there are all of these props that you have around the screen, the stage, so to speak, that you can manipulate. There's the use of spotlights continuously on characters or to highlight a specific piece of evidence. It suddenly occurred to me. It's obviously not a stage play. It's a game, but the way that it's designed visually it uses a lot of stagecraft.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Japanese theater influence in the video games we play. I am 99% sure that the reason Final Fantasy games have one the hero's characters on the right and the enemies on the left, and exaggerations for attacks and victory poses are because of kabuki theater. That's sort of how things are presented, and because you're experiencing this on a 2D plane, and the way, like you said, the way things are highlighted and the way characters enter and exit, it does feel like a stage play at times.
They're
I basically
props.
agree.
Everything is a prop that you manipulate. I mean, as an actor, there's nothing more that you like to do than play with props.
And in Japanese theater, there's basically stagehands called kurokos, dressed all in black with black cloths over their face, hide in the background to manipulate objects in a couple different forms of Japanese theater. So in a way, this is a stage play, and you're an invisible kuroko.
I think we just put it together.
That's fascinating. And I think so much of this, as we talked about with the animations, I mean, so much of this game is sold through its physicality, through like you sense the emotion in the characters through how they're animated and how they're moving, whether that's the exaggerations of Officer Bailey, whether that's kind of the sometimes devil may care attitude of Lynn.
The blue cop or the green cop?
Oh yeah, blue cop and green cop, and then there's the there's the detective who crashes the van. I think Sissel gives him a silly nickname too before we learn his real name.
Yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, the one with the hat. It's the best way I can put it. Yeah, so much of it is sold through that, and it does kind of seem, I think that kind of contributes to it, more being a stage play, because you can't always see the if you're seeing a play, you might be far back in the audience, and you might not be able to see the minute facial expressions and such. But when you see the actual movements, you can understand the emotion that they're trying to convey. So I think that's something really fascinating with it, because these characters are not highly expressive, because they're a DS game in terms of facial expressions and things like that.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. The character model animations are pretty detailed for a 2010 DS game, but there isn't really facial animation or even speech animation. It's but it works with the technology it has and the presentation it's chosen very well, I think. And there's one thing that we haven't really talked about much. This game does have an underlying story. Sissel wants to discover the circumstances of his death, and starts out sort of following Lynn for clues, and eventually you meet these some unusual characters all in blue. It's clear that they're either a foreign government or like an evil organization of some kind, like some Ernst Blofeld, James Bond nonsense. That and they have an ulterior motive that is definitely not clear yet. But it just makes me racist against blue people just watching their unadulterated evil in this game. Giving me some complicated feelings about the Blue Man Group, I think. But the
how do you feel about James Cameron's Avatar?
You know what? I have not hated it so much until when I started playing this game a few weeks ago. I had forgotten everything about that movie, but now I still hate it.
I think everyone's forgotten everything about that movie.
Yeah, it's a little weird. For a mega blockbuster that set records in 2008 or whenever that was, I mean, you don't really see Avatar superfans cosplaying at conventions. Or people excitedly talking about Avatar 2 and 3, which evidently are coming. I mean, I enjoy many James Cameron movies, but I'm sort of surprised that's the one that made $2 billion or however much it did.
I think it's amazing that there's an entire themed land based around Avatar at Animal Kingdom in Florida, and there's probably an entire generation of kids who are visiting that, and they don't even have a clue there's a movie. They just think it's a themed land.
Huh. All right. Anyway, this is not the blue people of Avatar. This is the blue people of a mysterious organization or possible foreign government that I'm not sure we know the name of yet. And the assassins, the couple in the restaurant, and also two people that seem to be leadership within this group. You meet them through a phone line pretty early in the game, but they're definitely involved somehow. And you follow Lynn, realizing that there was a meeting to happen in that restaurant, which is why you go to the restaurant in the first place. Lynn is trying to gather clues very urgently because a dear friend of hers, a detective that sort of that saved Lynn's life a decade earlier and was Lynn's inspiration to become a detective, he is going to be executed later that night, and she's trying to exonerate him before that can happen, which leads you to try and locate the prisoner that she gives you his prison number, and that's when you meet the prison guards in the office outside the prison, and the rock star and the curry lover that are also occupants in the prison. But when you meet that prisoner, whose name is Detective Jowd, or maybe Detective Jode, he's painting a picture, and when you see the front of the picture is of Sissel, the distinctive pointy blonde hair and sunglasses, and it's like, why does this detective know who Sissel is? And then I think either just before or just after that, you learn that the two blue people in the restaurant were intending to meet Sissel for something. So and Sissel doesn't remember any of this. He has amnesia. He did not know who Detective Jowd was before seeing his face on that painting. He didn't know what he was going to meet those two people for. And when you sort of return to the prison to relay some information from Lynn back to Detective Jowd, the prison people who have not had to do an execution in a decade or something, their electric chair shorts out and explodes, which results in you first having to save Jowd's life because the explosion killed him.
It still technically worked.
Which I guess it worked. He did die as a result of the chair. So I guess the ends justify the means for the executioners in this case. But that also allows Jowd to communicate with you now that he's a ghost and has met Sissel. And but then after you undo that explosion, there's a prison blackout, and in one of the most awkward missions in the whole game, you have to guide Jowd through a prison escape in a prison escape by while there are guards with flashlights looking for him. So it's a lot of Jowd hiding under a bed, you messing around with some stuff, and when the guards turned away, you give Jowd a signal to move to the next hiding spot. It's that one took me a couple tries to nail. I didn't get it right on the first go. But it's also really not like any other mission in the game. Would you agree?
I would say it's not like any other mission in the game, and thank God. Yeah, I'm not a giant fan of that mission.
Agreed.
I came I've come around to it now that I finished it, but during the time I was like, I'm not understanding what this is, and then I understood that Jowd has some pretty beastly strength, and that I should not have expected. I shouldn't have guessed that he would not be able to pull himself up to the extent that he does.
Oh yeah, he has the impossible grip strength and upper body strength of the main character of any video game where you climb, including recent Tomb Raider games where Lara Croft is about as skinny as a sapling, but can do kick her legs above her head while hanging off the side of a cliff.
She's a beast.
Yeah, you have video game strength.
Yeah, I thought I was trying to guide this character from Dream Daddy around the stage, but it turns out I was just playing Prince of Persia, so that was cool.
Yeah, everything down to rewinding time to the outrageous agility from your main characters. This is exactly. a secret Prince of Persia game.
Totally.
Can I jump back to something for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remembered what my favorite animation in the game is. In the prison escape, there's a trap door, and there's one of the guards, and he's in the trap door, and he has a gun, and he's like hiding there, spotting anyone who comes by. So in order to get Jowd by him, you have to open the trap door so he falls down. And in this particular level, by the way, it's completely black. So you can't see anything. You can only see a little area around you, and you can see the red from the guard's night vision goggles. So once this guard falls down, he tries to get back up to his position. So you just see this little red dot going up the stairs, and then going up the stairs, and then taking 3 steps, and then this little red dot falling down very quickly onto the ground. And it never ceases to crack me up. Because there's no animation, there's no real character. It's just a little red dot, and it's just the visual in my head of just this little story being told over and over again.
Those poor cops have about as much luck as a Sideshow Bob trying to walk across a deck full of rakes. They just keep falling for the same trap.
Just about.
I actually do like the fact that they set up in this game, all the game over setups actually make sense. For this section, Jowd said specifically, "They'll shoot me on sight if they see me." So if they see Jowd, then they'll shoot him on sight. Then you have to go back again to his death. I mean, they skip the animation and everything, but it's an in-game reason why you can repeat the escape over and over again until he gets out. It's because every single time they spot him, they'll just shoot him.
And your rewinding time ability, provides some justification for going back to the beginning of a stage after failure. This is in the same place in the game, the prison, but a few missions earlier is one of my favorite animations. You have the musician prisoner and the curry-loving prisoner. They have an elaborate scheme that you discover if you just sort of wait and just sort of watch them in action. What you're trying to do is reach Detective Jowd's cell, and he's in the lower left. And you have to sort of go from upper left to upper right to lower left. But the way you do so is you have the curry-loving prisoner who's trying to dig out of the prison. And whenever a prison guard comes by, the rockstar prisoner flushes a piece of toilet paper down the toilet, which when it gets down through the sewer piping to the curry-loving prisoner, it rings a bell, and he scoots out of where he's digging and lies down and pretends to sleep until the guards pass. And to get to Detective Jowd's cell, you have to basically set up the toilet paper plot just right, and then ride that piece of toilet paper down to the curry-loving prisoner, jump inside the spoon that the curry-loving prisoner is using to dig, and then stay in the spoon as he throws the spoon into the glass near his the sink in his room. So you have to ride from toilet paper through pipeline into a spoon, and then a perfectly thrown spoon into a glass at the other side of the cell, which gets you close enough to Jowd to reach him. Again, completely incomprehensible unless you see it in action. But trust me, this is a real game, and that is a real puzzle you have to figure out.
There's just nothing like it on. There's nothing like it on the DS. There's nothing like it. Period.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the earlier point that it that this kind of shows off what exactly the DS can do. It's like a relaxed version of The World Ends With You, in terms of really showing off what exactly the capabilities of the system is, or kind of like Nintendogs, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is what I would call a graphical powerhouse presentation, but the animations
No.
are so good, and the visuals are just so appealing. It's just a very good looking DS game.
Yeah, and not in terms of like the actual performance of it, but just in terms of the little bits and bobs that the DS has, that allow these games to play so well on it.
I mean, now that I think about it, this game has spawned a couple of. I mean, I haven't played it yet. Have either? What's the name of the game? Is it the Sexy Brutale or something like that? It's a very similar concept that got released last year. Indie darling game of the year kind of game where you have to go back in time and solve murders in a somewhat similar fashion to Ghost Trick. It's a completely different graphic presentation, but it's
I believe it is Sexy Brutale is what it's called.
Sexy Brutale. Yeah, it's been on my to play list for quite some time.
I haven't heard of it. No.
I remember when it came out, there was some buzz around it, but I have not played it.
I just like the Groundhog Day mechanic in games and movies and anything really. It's a fun mechanic to see the same event from different perspectives.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe not exactly Rashomon, but it's definitely an intriguing mechanic. Solving a puzzle, but the puzzle is a real life action and not shapes on a board or something, or different finding which keys go in the right lock. This game is a ghost using poltergeist powers to influence the environment in small ways, to change actions of background characters. Is just really unique and cool. Everything about Ghost Trick is unique and cool, and again, going back to that premise and having a ghost button and a trick button be 95% of the gameplay of the game. I was invested from the very beginning, and both the intrigue of who Sissel is and what this organization's doing and why the detective went in jail. There's a lot of background intrigue in the storyline, and a lot of sort of big humor and big drama in the dialogue. It has a uniquely dark and funny tone, but a storyline that has you hooked from pretty early on. And as such, Joe, you have the benefit of this being new to you. Jono and I are both, I'm certain, although I don't want to put words in Jono's mouth, we're definitely trying to avoid specific discussion topics, or maybe even specific keywords to keep you in the dark a little bit. So I want to know whether it's a character thing or an overall story thing. Do you have a prediction of, I don't know, either a character factoid or an end game scenario that you'd like to put forward in front of the class? Figure what's one or two things that you think might happen in the end game of this, and we'll see how correct you are after you finish the game and we record the second episode.
Okay, so one of them is, and I feel pretty good about this one, that Sissel is not Sissel.
Interesting.
Or because there are just some things that don't line up. He has no as like characters, who are unconscious or something like that, they don't have, and when they first come to, they don't have any recollection of who they are. But he has no idea. Like it's like he's untethered to the person, to the this dead person in yellow that we see at the beginning of the game, and in different spots in the game. Like I think there's I can't remember who it is, but there's one character who, when they die, they accidentally project themselves as the wrong form. I think it's Lynn.
Yeah, I think it's I think it is Lynn.
Yeah, it's Lynn who thinks she's Cabanella.
Doesn't she take on the look of the Justice Minister or something? Or
I think it's Cabanella, and then she goes, "Oh, thank God it wasn't that."
Yeah, that's right. It's Cabanella, not the Justice Minister.
Yeah. So she does that. So that demonstrates that someone could have a false perception of themselves, and so Sissel, or the person who thinks they're Sissel, could not be that person. They might have like a different projection, and they might be someone unrelated. They might be Ray. I don't know.
Yeah, that's another mystery of the game. Ray does not explain who they are at all. And when you go back to the junkyard for chapters other than chapter 1, Ray is still there, just hiding in a lamp, just sort of bouncing back and forth, having a good time, and answering your questions without really giving you any new information. So we don't know who or what Ray is. Sissel might not be the cover character that we think they are. There's also a lot of weird things about Sissel, like I don't know if
He can't read.
Yeah, that's right. When he's trying to read the prisoner schedules in the prison cells, Sissel can't read. So that's strange. An adult human should be able to read.
Yeah, I mean, literacy is not 100% across the world, but I'm guessing that if Sissel had some information for Lynn, or this character of Sissel had some information for Lynn, I'm guessing he was literate. And now that I'm thinking about it, my prediction is that it's something with Ray being the quote unquote Sissel who died, because they also have a very similar color palette with the red lamp.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, red
yellow with the yellow light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and the person we believe is Sissel, the cover character, has a red suit and distinctive yellow hair.
Yeah, and I think there's something weird going on with Inspector Cabanella, because I feel like he probably had a hand in whatever befell Detective Jowd, because like he didn't go to visit him. Apparently, although they were apparently close, and he seems like a total careerist.
Mm-hmm.
And so he seems like the kind of person who would do just about anything to keep himself on track to promotion and such like that.
And also Jowd seems to have accepted his fate, and even asked to be executed, while Lynn is convinced of Jowd's innocence. There's a lot of strange things surrounding why Jowd is in prison and why Cabanella behaves the way he does. There's a lot that's unexplained or underexplained. And in fact, where we are in the game right now, Chapter 10 is Sissel going to the Justice Minister's office, only to find Lynn there, alive, unusually, and the Justice Minister dead, because Lynn had gone there to try and convince the Justice Minister to delay Jowd's execution. And Chapter 10 is saving the Justice Minister, which is not really a spoiler that for you, Joe. I think you had figured that much out.
I just thought they were going to leave him dead.
Oh, really? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So
it's not like there are any specific powers that could, I don't know, rewind time 4 minutes to stop a person's death.
And the Justice Minister is a amusing character with some pretty goofy character model animations of his own. Well, let's just say that he makes some exaggerated gestures in his death scene, which I'm sure you'll enjoy very soon, Joe. Because this game is not very long. Each chapter, which is one or one and a half puzzles and a lot of dialogue, each chapter is maybe 40 minutes. and certainly under an hour. And at 18 chapters, this game clocks in the 12 to 14 hour range, which it never feels like it's wasting my time. It like the stakes are consistently high in each chapter. There is and there's a lot of story breadcrumbs chapter to chapter. It's fairly fast moving for being a short to medium length visual novel puzzle adventure.
I'm kind of glad for that because I like my long games, but the Vagrant Story, which I was on a couple of weeks ago, was 35 to 40 hours, and then before that was Wild Arms 3, which was 65 hours.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I mean I've done episodes on Persona 4 and Xenoblade Chronicles, and each of those is about 100 hours.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But this is a considerably shorter game than the last couple that we've done. Grandia, which was in the intervening month between Wild Arms 3 and Vagrant Story, is a solid 40 of its own, I think. And and Joe, I do not want to say anything as to how true your claims are, except I do want to say you make some good observations, and please keep playing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Of course, I'm gonna keep playing.
Joe, these are all very fascinating theories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good observations, Joe. That's all I'm gonna say. So,
Thanks,
Jono. Without revealing too much, what's one thing in the second half of the game that you're eager to discuss? Try to be a little vague for the audience and Joe's benefit.
Oh, geez, be vague.
Because I'll go first. I am really looking forward to the epilogue, because I think that the scenes in the epilogue are very touching, and I'm looking forward to talking about that when we do an episode 2 in a week.
I'm pretty excited to talk about the This is it's
I know. I didn't prepare you for this, John.
No.
Sorry.
It's tricky to say it. I know exactly what I want to say. I just can't, for fascinating reasons.
You can use phrases like a certain character. Or...
I'm excited for Joe to get some answers about their questions.
Got it. Okay. So, Joe, there will be some answers to your questions, and there is an entertaining epilogue to look forward to in the second half of Ghost Trick, Phantom Detective. I think I accidentally haven't said the word Phantom yet in this episode. Whoops. But...
what were we calling it? Was it Toast Frick?
Oh, yeah, Toast Frick.
Phantom Detective or what?
Yeah, in the pre-show, listeners, we were... doing various permutations of the words Ghost, Trick, Phantom, and Detective, and ended up with a hypothetical game called Toast Frick, where you solve, I think, cooking puzzles by fricking items, and asking, and the less you know about what that verb is, the better. So, okay, if we're talking about fricking, and if we're done talking about Japanese theater, maybe it's time to end the episode. Next week, we are doing our second Ghost Trick episode. It has obviously not been recorded yet, but we're going to give Joe and I an extra week to finish the game and then have another discussion. Hopefully it'll be as entertaining and intriguing as this one. And the week after that, we're almost a year after, but not quite, we're doing our year in review episode that we've done every year for, I don't know, at least 3 years? I'd have to check a list to see how far our years in review go. And after that, it'll be time to change the calendar, and our first 2020 episode will be a special episode about the PlayStation 1. Earlier this month, in the first week of December, was the 25th anniversary of the PlayStation, and that gave us the idea to do an episode celebrating the PS1. But when that happened, December was already filled out, basically. So that PlayStation-specific episode will be in early January. And the rest of January, we're going to have 2 episodes on Suikoden 5, which won a poll on episode 200 earlier this year. So year in review, more Ghost Trick, then PS1 episode, then Suikoden 5. So, listeners, thank you so much for joining us this week. You can contact the podcast via email using retro@rpgfan.com. That's the best way to reach the podcast directly with questions or comments. You can also comment on the message boards, visit the Facebook page, Instagram page, Twitter page, Discord server, or Twitch channel to see all of the content that RPG Fan has to offer. There's links to all of those things on the rpgfan.com main page. There are also many other fine podcasts part of RPG Fan. There's Random Encounter, which posts about every 2 weeks and is about randomness and current events, and Rhythm Encounter, which posts every blank. It is about video game music. Rhythm Encounter hasn't had a new episode in a little while, but it may come out of a hiatus soon. I know that there's been discussion behind the scenes about that, but no word yet. And also there's Phoenix Edge, which is a weekly podcast mostly focused on current events that is hosted live on YouTube every week and then posts to the usual podcast feeds, usually the day after they record it live. And speaking of podcasts and recording, you can review us or either of those other 3 podcasts on iTunes or Google Play or however you are listening to us. Please leave reviews, 5 stars, and whatever constructive feedback you are willing to write. So, Jono and Joe, let's tell the listeners how they can reach us directly should they choose to. Starting with you, Jono.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Jono Logan, so JONOLOGAN.
And Jono, you're also one of our fine review staff. What was the most recent review that you had on the site?
I got Romancing Saga 3 coming out in a couple of days, I think.
Oh, cool! So that'll probably be already out the time that we post this episode because we're posting this. We're posting this a couple. We're posting this a couple days after we record.
Yeah,
so
I
excellent.
think it should be out by then.
Excellent, Romancing Saga 3. And Joe, how can listeners reach you?
So you can, because I'm one of the social media people, I'm on Facebook and Twitter for RPG Fan, but you can also find me on Twitter and Discord and Instagram as @QueersForFears, which I've appeared on quite a few of these episodes, and you've
had a very busy autumn, Joe.
Yeah. But each time when I say my handle, I'm like, that was a decision I made a few years ago. Oh boy.
And Joe, as you mentioned a moment ago, you are on the social media staff. So if listener, you are interacting with RPG Fan on Facebook or Twitter, Joe might be the person you're speaking to directly. And usually you'll sign like with a -JO, right?
Correct. Yep. And I also would like to give a bit of a plug for Jono's review of The Outer Worlds.
Yes.
Which I thought was a lovely review, really good. So that's up on our website and such, and you should definitely check that out.
Yeah, I think Outer Worlds came out in late October-ish, or maybe early November, and it has made quite a splash. It looks fantastic. One of my close friends is playing it and giving me text updates of all the silly crap he's up to.
It's so good. If you love Fallout, you're just going to adore this game. If you love what Fallout was, you're going to adore this game.
And this is the team that created Fallout New Vegas and Pillars of Eternity and many other games with fantastic writing. So I'm glad that Outer Worlds at least lived up to most, if not all, of its hype. That's really. I'm happy when a game I'm interested in ends up really good.
Yeah, I had a really good time with it.
Speaking of games that came out in 2019, we have our Games of the Year stuff happening pretty soon. That's going to be in the last week of December or so. We're going to roll out our Best of 2019 awards. And just before that, I think probably this week, it might already be out or partially out now, we're revealing our top 25 RPGs of the decade. Games that came out between 2010 and 2019 inclusive.
Yeah, I keep forgetting it. It's not just the end of the year, it's the end of the decade.
Yeah, well, the end of the thirds digit in the year is going to change very soon. The decade is technically 2011 to 2020, but
okay.
no one cares about the old 0 BC rules, so we're calling the decade 2010 to 2019. The reason that a decade goes from 1 to 10 is because there's no year 0 BC, and the first decade the first decade of AD was 1 to 10, and the previous decade was 1 BC to 10 BC. So that's why the decade is technically 2011 to 2020. But nobody cares because the third digit of the calendar year is more clear to people than what the decades were 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, that's dumb. We just want to see the numbers go. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, that's why I played this. I've played like 6 Disgaea games. I love numbers changing and increasing. But listeners, I guess I haven't told you how to find me yet. You can find me on Twitter at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times. I am also on this podcast most of the time, and on Discord at Monsoon as Monsoon Mike. And yeah, please look forward to the next Ghost Trick episode. Thank you, good night, and good luck.